Edgar Villar, a powerful and arrogant millionaire, never saw Maya as anything more than a simple waitress. In front of a packed restaurant, he humiliated her, expecting her to stay silent, to lower her head in shame. But then, something no one expected happened. Stay until the end to witness this unforgettable moment. Let's go. Imagine a luxury restaurant full of important people. The sound of cutlery echoes, conversations mix in the air, and waiters run from one side to the other. In the midst of this scenario, a young black waitress serves customers with patience and a trained smile. Her name is Maya, and her life has always been a silent struggle. But that night, something would happen, something that would change everything. He walked in like he owned the place. Edgar Villar, a billionaire businessman known for his arrogance. Tall, dressed in an impeccable suit, he exuded an air of superiority that he made a point of demonstrating. He walked to the most exclusive table and sat down without waiting to be shown. Maya took a deep breath, adjusted her apron and approached. "Good evening, sir. What do you want?" He looked up, studying her as if he were examining something worthless. Black coffee, no sugar, and fast. His dry, dismissive tone sent a chill down Maya's spine, but she just nodded and went to get the order. She'd dealt with difficult clients before, but there was something about him that bothered her more than usual. When she returned with the cup, Edgar stopped her before she could put it on the table. "That piano in the corner. Is it just decoration, or does anyone here know how to play?" Maya froze for a moment. "Anyone can use it, sir," he replied, maintaining a professional tone. Edgar smiled crookedly. "And you? Do you know how to play?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath. "My job is to serve customers, sir." Edgar let out a low laugh. "What a waste! But who knows? Maybe you have a hidden talent." The provocation was clear. He wanted to turn her into a spectacle for his own amusement. The restaurant was silent. Everyone could see the tension in the air. Some customers looked curious, others pretended not to notice. But Maya knew everyone was paying attention. It was then that, without realizing it, the words came out of his mouth. "I know how to play." Edgar's smile widened. "And even? Then prove it." All eyes turned to her. Maya hesitated. It had been years since he last played, but then he remembered his father, from nights at the piano, the freedom that music gave him. She turned and walked towards the instrument. The silence in the restaurant was so profound that Maya could hear her own breathing. Her fingers hovered over the piano keys, and for an instant, fear threatened to overwhelm her. But then a memory popped into her mind. Her father, sitting next to her, guiding her small hands as they played. Together, she closed her eyes and pressed the first key. The sound filled the room like a wave, charged with emotion and meaning. The next notes came naturally, as if they were always waiting to be released. At first, the audience sat motionless, not knowing what to expect. Edgar Villar, the arrogant millionaire who had challenged her, crossed his arms and kept his gaze fixed on her, convinced that he would see her fail. But as the melody unfolded, something began to change in the atmosphere. The restaurant, once filled with chatter and muffled laughter, was filled with reverent silence. Maya's music carried a truth that words could not express. It was a reflection of her life, her struggles, everything that had always been denied to her. When he reached the most intense part of the composition, he felt a shiver run down his spine. Her music wasn't just a response to the man trying to humiliate her. It was a declaration of who she was, and for the first time, Edgar Villar had nothing to say. The final notes echoed through the hall, dissolving into absolute silence. Maya felt her chest rise and fall at a rapid pace, her breathing heavy after that intense delivery. For a moment, no one moved. The eyes were fixed on her, as if everyone was trying to process what they had just heard. Then a lone sound broke the silence, an applause, first shy, coming from one of the tables in the back, then another, and one more, until suddenly the entire restaurant burst into applause. Maya looked around in surprise. Some customers were standing, clapping enthusiastically. Others murmured among themselves as if they couldn't believe what they had witnessed. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it vibrating in her fingertips. But it was when she looked at Edgar Villa that she realized the true impact of what had just happened. He wasn't smiling. There was no longer that look of superiority on his face. Instead, his expression was difficult to decipher. Maya saw his fingers drum against the table, an impatient gesture, as if he were trying to hide an unexpected discomfort. "Interesting," he murmured, without looking at her directly. But Maya didn't need him to say anything else, because for the first time since Edgar Villa entered that restaurant, he was not in control of the situation, and she knew it. Maya felt the blood pumping through her veins as she stood up from the piano. His body was still shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from adrenaline. She had never played in front of so many people, and their reaction was something she never imagined seeing. When he turned around, he met the eyes of the customers. Some smiled, impressed. Others seemed thoughtful, as if his music had awakened something deep within them. But the look that intrigued her most was Edgar Villa's. He was sitting with a rigid posture, his blue eyes fixed on her, but without the arrogance from before. His jaw was clenched as if he was trying to process something he didn't want to admit. Maya walked back behind the counter, trying to ignore the heat of the eyes on her. Before he could disappear into the kitchen, he heard the heavy sound of a chair scraping on the floor. Edgar Villar stood up. The restaurant fell silent again. What would he do now? Maya held her breath as he reached for her wallet. She thought he was just going to throw money on the table and leave as if nothing had happened. But instead, he walked over to where she was. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "How much do you earn here?" Edgar asked, his voice firm, but without the same coldness as before. She blinked, confused. "What?" he repeated, this time more calmly. "How much do you earn?" Maya crossed her arms. She didn't know exactly what he wanted, but she wouldn't allow him to throw. Another tease. "Enough to pay my bills," he replied dryly. Edgar Villar let out a short laugh, shaking his head as if he had just confirmed something to himself. "No," he corrected. "You earn less than you should." He then held out a black and gold card to her. "Call this number tomorrow. I want to talk about opportunities." Maya didn't take the card right away. Her instinct told her to be cautious. "Opportunities?" she questioned, keeping her gaze steady on his. He sighed and rubbed his temple with his fingers as if he was dealing with something uncomfortable. "You are talented. Very talented. And talented people shouldn't waste their lives carrying trays." She felt her heart squeeze. Her hands still held her apron, a reminder of who she was at that moment. But who could she be? Edgar Villa did not wait for a response. He just placed the card on the counter and gave her one last look. "Think about it," he said, before turning and leaving the restaurant. The silence he left behind was deafening. Maya stared at the card without touching it. His reaction was the opposite of what he imagined. He didn't laugh at her. He didn't humiliate her. He didn't try to diminish what she did. On the contrary, he looked uncomfortable, as if his music had made something inside him tremble. And now she had a choice to make. Maya stood behind the counter looking at the gold and black card as if it were an impossible puzzle to decipher. The restaurant's customers had already returned to their conversations, but she still felt the weight of the moment. Millionaire Edgar Villar, who minutes ago seemed to want to humiliate her, was now offering her an opportunity. She hesitantly took the card, turning it over in her fingers. The name printed on it was Villar Holdings, followed by a direct number. His stomach dropped. Was he serious? Or was it just another game? "So, are you going to call?" The hoarse, good-natured voice of Celia, the restaurant's oldest cook, brought her back to reality. The woman dried her hands on a dish towel as she looked at Maya with a curious smile. "I don't know," Maya admitted, putting the card in her apron pocket. "It could be just another way for him to play with me." Celia laughed softly. "Or it could be a door opening. You played that piano like you were born to do it, girl." Who knows what could happen? Maya took a deep breath, not knowing what to think. That night, after work, Maya walked home feeling the cold city breeze against her face. His thoughts were in turmoil. She always dreamed of music, but never imagined that a stranger, and on top of that a man like Edgar Villar, would be the person to offer her something related to it. When she arrived at her small apartment, she took off her shoes, threw her bag on the sofa, and picked up her card again. He ran his finger over the printed name, feeling a strange hesitation inside him. She opened her cell phone screen and typed in the number. His thumb hovered over the call button, and then, before he could change his mind, he pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Villa Holdings. Who speaks? Maya felt her throat go dry. Hello. My name is Maya. I was instructed to call this number by Edgar Villar. There was silence on the other side. Then a female voice responded, professional and precise. Miss Maya, Mr. Villar is waiting for your contact. Can you come to his office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Maya's eyes widened. Was he really waiting for her? Yes, I can. Excellent. We will be waiting. The call ended before she could properly process what she had just done. She dropped her cell phone on the couch and buried her face in her hands. What the hell was going on with his life? The next day came faster than Maya expected. She could barely sleep, tossing and turning, thinking about whether or not she should go to Edgar Villar's office. But now, standing in front of a glass skyscraper in the center of the city, she felt there was no turning back. He took a deep breath and entered the building. The atmosphere was luxurious, with gleaming marble and impeccably dressed receptionists. She felt eyes on her as she crossed the lobby. Her worn jeans and simple blouse contrasted with the formality of the place. "Can I help?" asked an elegant woman at the reception, looking Maya up and down. "I have a meeting with Mr. Villar. My name is Maya." The receptionist hesitated for a second before typing something into the computer. Then he took out a visitor badge and handed it to her. "Mr. Villar is waiting, the elevator on the right, floor 38. Maya swallowed. His heart was pounding as he walked to the elevator and pressed the button. As soon as the doors closed, she closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing. When the elevator opened on the 38th floor, a spotless, silent hallway led her to a dark wooden double door. Before she could knock, the door opened. There he was, Edgar Villar, sitting behind a refined wooden table, wearing an impeccable dark suit. He looked up when he saw her and gestured for her to enter. "I thought you weren't coming." Maya felt the tension in the air, but she stood her ground. "Me too." Edgar smiled sideways. "Sit down. We have a lot to talk about." Maya sat in the leather chair in front of the table, maintaining a firm posture. Edgar Villar sat back, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You surprised me yesterday," he said bluntly. She crossed her arms. "Was that the intention?" He chuckled softly but didn't seem bothered. "Perhaps, but I confess that I expected a disaster. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Raw talent, true passion." Maya frowned. "What do you want from me, Mr. Villar?" He leaned forward. "I want to invest in you." Maya blinked, confused. "Invest?" "Yes, I want to pay for your classes at one of the best music schools in the city. I want to introduce you to influential people who can open doors for you." Maya felt her heart race. "And what do I need to do in return?" He stared at her for a long moment before responding. "Just accept it." Maya let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Edgar sighed and ran a hand through his grey hair. "Maybe it's because, for the first time in a long time, I saw something that money can't buy." She was silent. His proposal was tempting, but also frightening. What if it was a game? What if there was something behind this? She had a choice to make. Maya felt her body tense. Edgar Villar's words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't just accept them without question. "Are you asking me to believe that a man like you, who tried to humiliate me in front of a full restaurant, now wants to help me?" His voice was firm, but filled with distrust. Edgar Villa rested his elbows on the table and intertwined his fingers, studying her with that calculating look. "I don't expect you to believe me right away," he admitted, "but I wouldn't have wasted my time calling you here if I didn't think you were worth it." Maya held back the urge to roll her eyes. "So now I'm worthy of your time." He let out a heavy sigh. "Look, I'm not an easy man to deal with. I know I was an idiot yesterday, but if I didn't see potential in you, I wouldn't even bother." Maya clenched her fists in her lap. "And why does this bother you so much? You have nothing to gain from me." A silence fell between the two. Edgar looked away for a brief moment, as if he was dealing with something inside himself that even he didn't understand. "Maybe because I need to believe that I can still recognize something genuine," he said finally. Maya felt a shiver run up her spine. There was something about the way he said it, a weight that didn't match the arrogant man she'd met the night before. But she couldn't let herself be carried away. "You want to invest in me," he repeated, as if he was testing the words in his own mouth. "Exactly," Edgar confirmed. "And," confirmed, "there's no catch, no conditions." He gave a discreet smile. "Just one. You can't waste this chance." Maya bit her lip. Her heart screamed for her to accept it. His brain told him to be careful. She was faced with the biggest opportunity of her life. And yet, he hesitated. The elevator door opened on the ground floor, but Maya didn't move immediately. His legs felt heavy, as if his mind was fighting against his own body. What had just happened was too surreal to simply carry on with your life as if nothing had changed. When she finally exited the building, the daylight seemed brighter than usual, forcing her to squint for a moment. City traffic whizzed around him, but his head was elsewhere. And now, she took Edgar Villa's card from her pocket and ran her fingers over the golden name. His invitation still pulsed in his mind. "Only one condition. You can't waste this chance." She wanted to believe it was genuine, but life had never been kind to her. Why would it be any different now? "Maya," the voice brought her out of her thoughts. Turning around, he found Celia, the restaurant's cook, standing on the sidewalk with shopping bags in her hands. "What are you doing here?" Celia frowned, analyzing the imposing building that Maya had just left. Maya hesitated for a moment before responding. "I just had a strange conversation." Celia raised an eyebrow. "The kind that changes your life?" Maya let out a sigh. "The kind that leaves me more confused than before." The cook smiled sideways. "Confusion means you have choices. Better than having none, don't you think?" Maya didn't respond. He just put the card back in his pocket and started walking next to Celia. But as much as she trying to absorb the words she had just heard. "Training?" Edgar Villa smiled sideways, as if he had already expected that reaction. "Yes. Do you want to take this seriously? So you need to be prepared for what lies ahead." She felt her heart speed up. "I thought you just wanted to pay for some piano lessons." He crossed his arms. "I don't make small investments, Maya. If I'm going to bet on you, I want you to be ready for any opportunity." Maya looked down at her own hands, still shaking slightly after playing. This was going too fast. "What exactly does this training involve?" Edgar shrugged. "Discipline, improvement, exposure to the right environment, and learning to deal with people like me." The provocative tone made her narrow her eyes. "People like you? People who will judge you before they even hear your music," he said bluntly. "Talent is not enough in this world. Maya, you need to know how to play the game." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. She already knew the world was cruel, but hearing it from someone who was part of it made it all the more real. "I've never played that game," she admitted. Edgar tilted his head. "Then it's time to learn." She felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. If he accepted, he would embark on a path he never imagined he would take. But if he refused, he would go back to the restaurant. He would go back to his usual life. Maya took a deep breath. "Okay," he said finally. "What do I need to do?" Edgar smiled. "Tomorrow, 7 in the morning, I want you here." Maya's eyes widened. 7 in the morning. If you think that success waits, you are wrong." He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Prepare the room for the first day. It starts tomorrow." Maya slowly stood up, feeling like her life was about to change irreversibly. Edgar hung up the phone and looked at her. Welcome to the real world. And Maya knew, in that instant, that there was no going back. Maya could barely sleep that night. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop. She knew that the next day would mark the beginning of something completely new. At 6:30 in the morning, she was already up, wearing comfortable clothes, not knowing exactly what to expect. Nervousness made her move quickly, but a part of her still wondered, did I make the right choice? When she arrived at the building where Edgar Villar was waiting for her, she was greeted by an older man with a rigid appearance and impeccable posture. "Maya, right?" he asked without smiling. She nodded, not knowing if she should say anything. "My name is Mr. Moretti. I was a pianist for 40 years and a teacher to some of the greatest musicians in this country. If you are here, it means that Mr. Villa believes there is something in you. I, on the other hand, am still not sure." The coldness in his voice made Maya swallow hard. "Training begins now," he said, leading her into a large room where a black grand piano gleamed in the soft light. Next door, Edgar Villar watched everything with his arms crossed, as if he was just waiting to see what would happen. "Sit down," Moretti ordered. Maya hesitated for a second before walking over to the piano and touching the keys lightly, feeling its familiarity and at the same time the weight of. In that moment, "Touch," Moretti instructed. "Anything. I want to hear who you are." Maya closed her eyes. His heart was racing, but his hands were steady. And then she rang. The room was filled with a melody that came straight from his soul, soft at first, then intense, charged with all the emotions she'd held in for years. When it ended, the silence that remained in the air seemed as strong as the music itself. Moretti said nothing for a long moment. Then he took a step forward, crossed his arms and muttered, "Interesting." Maya took a deep breath, expecting something more. "You have talent, he said. "But talent is not enough." She felt a shiver run down her spine. Edgar Villa smiled sideways. "That's what I told her." Moretti continued, "Tomorrow we really start. Arrive at 5:30 a.m. If you want to turn this talent into something real, you have to be willing to pay the price." Maya blinked in surprise. 5:30 a.m. "The world doesn't wait, miss," Moretti replied impatiently. Edgar Villar let out a low laugh. "Better get used to it." Maya looked at the two men in front of her and felt reality sinking in within her. She had talent. But now he would have to prove that he also had discipline. And that would be the hardest part of all. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning. Maya slowly opened her eyes, feeling every muscle protest the lack of rest. She had never woken up so early for anything. But now he had no choice. If he wanted to turn his talent into something real, he needed to pay the price. He took a cold shower to shake off the sleep, put on comfortable clothes, and caught the bus earlier than any other day in his life. When he arrived at the building, it was still dark. 5:25 a.m. Trying to absorb the words she had just heard. "Training?" Edgar Villa smiled sideways, as if he had already expected that reaction. "Yes. Do you want to take this seriously? So you need to be prepared for what lies ahead." She felt her heart speed up. "I thought you just wanted to pay for some piano lessons." He crossed his arms. "I don't make small investments, Maya. If I'm going to bet on you, I want you to be ready for any opportunity." Maya looked down at her own hands, still shaking slightly after playing. This was going too fast. "What exactly does this training involve?" Edgar shrugged. "Discipline, improvement, exposure to the right environment, and learning to deal with people like me." The provocative tone made her narrow her eyes. "People like you? People who will judge you before they even hear your music," he said bluntly. "Talent is not enough in this world. Maya, you need to know how to play the game." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. She already knew the world was cruel, but hearing it from someone who was part of it made it all the more real. "I've never played that game," she admitted. Edgar tilted his head. "Then it's time to learn." She felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. If he accepted, he would embark on a path he never imagined he would take. But if he refused, he would go back to the restaurant. He would go back to his usual life. Maya took a deep breath. "Okay," he said finally. "What do I need to do?" Edgar smiled. "Tomorrow, 7 in the morning, I want you here." Maya's eyes widened. 7 in the morning. If you think that success waits, you are wrong. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Prepare the room for the first day. It starts tomorrow." Maya slowly stood up, feeling like her life was about to change irreversibly. Edgar hung up the phone and looked at her. "Welcome to the real world." And Maya knew, in that instant, that there was no going back. Maya could barely sleep that night. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop. She knew that the next day would mark the beginning of something completely new. At 6:30 in the morning, she was already up, wearing comfortable clothes, not knowing exactly what to expect. Nervousness made her move quickly, but a part of her still wondered, did I make the right choice? When she arrived at the building where Edgar Villar was waiting for her, she was greeted by an older man with a rigid appearance and impeccable posture. "Maya, right?" he asked without smiling. She nodded, not knowing if she should say anything. "My name is Mr. Moretti. I was a pianist for 40 years and a teacher to some of the greatest musicians in this country. If you are here, it means that Mr. Villa believes there is something in you. I, on the other hand, am still not sure." The coldness in his voice made Maya swallow hard. "Training begins now," he said, leading her into a large room where a black grand piano gleamed in the soft light. Next door, Edgar Villar watched everything with his arms crossed, as if he was just waiting to see what would happen. "Sit down," Moretti ordered. Maya hesitated for a second before walking over to the piano and touching the keys lightly, feeling its familiarity and at the same time the weight of. In that moment, "Touch," Moretti instructed. "Anything. I want to hear who you are." Maya closed her eyes. His heart was racing, but his hands were steady. And then she rang. The room was filled with a melody that came straight from his soul, soft at first, then intense, charged with all the emotions she'd held in for years. When it ended, the silence that remained in the air seemed as strong as the music itself. Moretti said nothing for a long moment. Then he took a step forward, crossed his arms and muttered, "Interesting." Maya took a deep breath, expecting something more. "You have talent, he said. "But talent is not enough." She felt a shiver run down her spine. Edgar Villa smiled sideways. "That's what I told her." Moretti continued, "Tomorrow we really start. Arrive at 5:30 a.m. If you want to turn this talent into something real, you have to be willing to pay the price." Maya blinked in surprise. 5:30 a.m. "The world doesn't wait, miss," Moretti replied impatiently. Edgar Villar let out a low laugh. "Better get used to it." Maya looked at the two men in front of her and felt reality sinking in within her. She had talent. But now he would have to prove that he also had discipline. And that would be the hardest part of all. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning. Maya slowly opened her eyes, feeling every muscle protest the lack of rest. She had never woken up so early for anything. But now he had no choice. If he wanted to turn his talent into something real, he needed to pay the price. He took a cold shower to shake off the sleep, put on comfortable clothes, and caught the bus earlier than any other day in his life. When he arrived at the building, it was still dark. 5:25 a.m. She took a deep breath before entering. In the studio, Moretti was already there, impeccable as if he didn't need to sleep. He looked at her without expressing any surprise. "You arrived on time. Good sign." Maya clenched her fists. "I said I would take this seriously." He motioned to the piano. "Then sit down. Today we really start." The first few hours were a shock. Moretti was not patient. He constantly interrupted Maya, correcting her posture, her touch, her way of feeling the music. "You're playing, but it's not delivering. Your sound needs to tell a story. If I wanted to hear someone just pressing keys, I would call anyone." His demand irritated her, but Maya knew he was right. This was no longer a dream. This was reality. She spent the entire morning playing the same sequence of notes until Moretti finally nodded. "Now you're starting to understand." Edgar Villar watched, everything from a distance. "You're going to hate him sometimes," he commented when Moretti left the room for a moment. Maya wiped the sweat from her forehead. "I already hate it." Edgar smiled. "That means he's doing a good job." The following days were exhausting. 5:30 a.m. every day, piano, lessons, music theory, endless rehearsals. Maya felt her fingers hurt, but she didn't give up. She came home countless nights exhausted, her body heavy, but her mind buzzing. She was learning, and Edgar Villar was always close by, watching. At first, Maya didn't understand why he was so invested, but one day, after a particularly difficult rehearsal, he moved and said something that caught me by surprise. "You think I'm helping you, but the truth is, you're helping me too." She frowned. "Like this," he sighed, "because when I touch you for the first time, I remembered what it means to feel. Something real." Maya was silent, processing his words. She didn't know what it had for him, but she knew what it wanted for her. She was not on the right path. After weeks of intense training, Moretti finally said something Maya thought she would never hear. "You're ready to play in public?" Maya felt her heart race. "What?" Edgar Villar smiled, crossing his arms. "We have a presentation for you." She blinked in surprise. "Where?" Moretti didn't hesitate. "At one of the most exclusive events in the city. You will play in front of the people who really matter." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the moment that could change everything, or consecrate it, or I would destroy it. And now she needed to decide if she was ready to face this. Maya felt her stomach drop. Playing for a restaurant full of customers had already been a challenge, but playing for an elite event with influential people watching your every move was something completely different. "When is this presentation?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Moretti crossed his arms. "In 3 days." Her eyes widened. 3 days? Is this enough time? Edgar Villar smiled sideways. "If it weren't, I wouldn't have suggested it." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. There was no longer any way to escape. This would be the biggest test of his life. The next 3 days were the most intense since training began. Moretti gave no quarter. He corrected every detail, from the way your hands moved over. The keys to the posture of your body. "You need to master the environment before you play," he said. "If you come in nervous, people will feel it." Maya practiced until her fingers hurt. She slept little and dreamed about the melodies she needed to play. The fear was always there, but something inside her burned stronger than the doubt. She wanted this, I needed that, and now I couldn't go wrong. On the day of the presentation, Maya looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her dress was elegant, something he never imagined wearing. Her hair was done, her skin glowed in the soft light of the dressing room. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. A knock on the door made her turn around. Edgar Villar entered, hands in his pockets, analyzing her. "Ready?" Maya laughed nervously. "I don't know." He came closer and looked her in the eyes. "You were born ready." She held his gaze, feeling his trust in her in a way she never expected. And then the presenter announced his name. It was time to go on stage. The hall was packed. Well-dressed men and women occupied every table, chatting quietly as they waited. The piano was center stage, waiting for her. Maya walked towards him, feeling each look that followed. His fingers trembled for a moment as he touched the keys, but then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This is about the music, not about Edgar, not about Moretti. It's not about proving something to anyone, just the music. And then she rang. The melody filled the hall, trapping every person there. For the first minute, there were still whispers, but as the music grew, they disappeared. There was just her and the notes, telling her story without the need for words. When the last note was played, Maya kept her hands on the keys for a second. The silence in the hall was absolute. And then Applause. First shy, then an explosion. Some people stood up, giving a standing ovation. Maya blinked in surprise. She had done it, she had won, but when looked at Edgar Villar in the audience, his serious and thoughtful face, he realized that this story was not over yet. There was something bigger waiting for her. She just needed to be ready for what came next. Maya remained seated at the piano, feeling her heart hammering against her chest. As the applause echoed throughout the room, the audience's reaction was far beyond what I expected. Some people were thrilled, others seemed completely surprised. She blinked a few times, trying to process what had just happened. She really had done it. When she finally stood up, she saw Moretti nodding, discreetly, as if she had finally recognized what Edgar Villar saw in her from the beginning. But it was Edgar who caught his attention. He wasn't smiling, he didn't celebrate like the others. He just watched her with that indecipherable expression. Maya felt a shiver. What was he thinking? Before he could figure it out, a man in a dark suit and grey hair approached. He seemed like one of the most important guests of the night. "Miss Maya, it was an extraordinary performance," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Thank you, sir," she replied, still trying to catch her breath. The man looked at Edgar Villar for a moment before turning to her. "You have a bright future. With the right training and the right connections, you can go a long way." Maya felt her stomach drop. The right connections. She knew what that meant. Those events were much more than just presentations. They were open doors to a world where few people could enter, and now someone was offering him a key. After the performance, Maya was taken to a private hall where important guests gathered for conversation and business. She was still trying to take it all in when Edgar Villar finally approached. "You played?" "Oh, well," he said, analyzing her. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Just fine." Edgar Villar smiled sideways. "It was exceptional, but don't get used to compliments. They make people lose their hunger." Maya crossed her arms, still feeling the adrenaline rush through her body. "So what's the next step?" Edgar looked at her for a moment, as if he was calculating something. "That depends on you." Like this, he leaned a little closer. "Now that you've proven what you're capable of, you have to decide how far you want to go." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She knew this moment would come. She was about to enter a new world, where talent wasn't enough, where influence, contacts, and power determined who reached the top. She looked around, seeing businessmen, famous musicians, and art critics talking in close circles. If he took one wrong step, he could lose everything. But if he refused to move forward, he might never have that chance again. Edgar Villar noticed her hesitation. "Do you think this is all difficult?" he asked, pointing around. "This is just the beginning." Maya took a deep breath. She knew he was right, and for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt hungry. He felt hungry for more, to go further, to be remembered. "I want to continue," she said without hesitation. Edgar Villar smiled. "Then it's time to start playing the game for real." And Maya knew in that instant that her journey was just beginning. Edgar Villar's gaze fixed on Maya, evaluating every detail of her expression. He knew that moment marked a turning point. "If you want to continue, then you need to understand something," he said slowly. "Talent brought you here, but what comes now demands much more than that." Maya crossed her arms, trying to demonstrate firmness. "And what exactly does it mean?" Edgar Villar smirked, but there was no humor in his expression. "It means that from now on, you will deal with people who are not just interested in your talent. They will want to know who you are, where you came from, and whether you are worth investing in." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. She already knew that the world of music wasn't just about playing well, but hearing it from him made everything more real. "So you want me to play their game?" she said, narrowing her eyes. Edgar Villar tilted his head. "I want you to understand the rules before you decide how to play it." Maya held his gaze. "What if I don't want to follow these rules?" Edgar Villar gave a discreet smile. "Then you'll have to create your own." She was silent for a moment. There was something dangerous in the way Edgar spoke, as if he was testing his resolve. But instead of retreating, Maya felt something grow inside her. She didn't want to be just another talent lost among so many. She wanted to be big, and to do that, she needed to understand exactly who was on her side and who was against her. The following days were unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Classes with Moretti continued, but now she was also introduced to a new type of learning, how to move in the world that Edgar Villar dominated. He took her to private events where influential businessmen and musicians discussed business over glasses of champagne. "Observe first," he told her in one of their meetings. "See who has the power in the room, who controls the conversation, who listens, and who decides." Maya, dressed in an elegant blue dress that she would never have chosen herself, watched everything carefully. She noticed that Edgar never said much, but when he spoke, everyone stopped to listen. He didn't ask for space. He occupied, and Maya understood that if she wanted to survive there, she needed to learn to do the same. It was then that a woman approached. "You must be Villar's protégé," she said, with a sharp smile. "Your name is already circulating in the right places." Maya frowned. "Is my name circulating?" The woman smiled. "Oh, darling, do you think talent is enough? Half of these people don't care what you play. They just want to know if you are worth the investment." Maya swallowed. She looked at Edgar Villar, who just observed the interaction without intervening. He wanted to see how she would react. Maya then lifted her chin and looked directly at the woman. "So, I think you already know the answer." The woman blinked in surprise, and then he smiled. Maybe you have. More potential than I thought." When she walked away, Edgar finally approached. "Good answer." Maya still felt her heart racing. "Did you know this would happen?" He shrugged. "The world of music is not just about playing well, Maya. It's about surviving what comes with it." And for the first time, she realized that the biggest battle wouldn't be on stage, it would be behind the scenes. Maya realized that the game Edgar Villar put her in wasn't just about talent, it was about influence, about knowing how to move in a space where few had access. In the following days, she began attending discreet meetings, exclusive dinners and events that she would never have imagined being invited to. Each of these encounters came with a test, a situation where I needed to prove that I deserved to be there. And she learned quickly. "You're fast," Edgar commented one night while watching Maya. "Who talked to a well-known music producer." She turned to him, arching an eyebrow. "I need to be. You gave me no choice." He smiled. "Exactly." But Maya noticed something. Edgar Villar was testing her the whole time. It wasn't just about helping her. He wanted to know how far she would go on her own. That night, Maya was alone in the dressing room at an important event. She was getting ready to play again, but she knew it was different now. This time, the people in the hall were not there to be surprised. They were there to confirm that she was really what everyone was saying. There were businessmen, music producers, journalists. Some wanted to see her shine, others expected her to fail, and Maya felt it. So, before going on stage, he took out his cell phone and typed a message to Edgar. "If I make a mistake tonight, is it over?" The answer came quickly. "If you're thinking about making a mistake, you've already lost." Maya clutched her cell phone in her hands, and then he left the dressing room and entered the stage. The hall was full. The piano was waiting for her in the center of the stage. Maya slowly walked towards him, feeling each gaze analyze her. His heart was pounding, but she would not show fear. He sat down on the bench, took a deep breath, and started playing. This time, it wasn't just about music, it was about presence, about command. Each note was a reminder that this space was now hers. And when it ended, the initial silence was replaced by intense applause. But what really mattered was not the applause. That was when Maya looked at Edgar Villar, and for the first time he truly smiled. It was no longer a test. She had won. But Maya knew the game was just beginning. The applause was still echoing when Maya got up from the piano. His body was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was pure adrenaline. She walked off the stage, feeling the eyes fixed on her, but now it was different. They weren't expecting her to fail. They waited to see what would come next. Backstage, Edgar Villar was leaning against the wall, watching her with that analytical gaze. "It was good," he said casually. Maya crossed her arms. "Just good," he gave a half smile. "If I tell you it was amazing, you'll relax. And now is not the time to relax." Maya snorted, but deep down she knew he was right. This was just the beginning. It was then that an elegant blonde woman approached. Her dress was impeccable and her gaze sharp. "Maya, right?" His voice was calm, but carried power. Maya nodded. "Yes." The woman smiled. "I'm Isabelle Laurent, artist's agent, and I think we can talk." Maya felt a shiver. She had heard that name before. Isabelle was responsible for launching careers. Edgar Villar remained silent at the side, just watching. Maya knew what that meant. From then on, every decision mattered even more. The next morning, Maya woke up to messages from unknown numbers. Meeting, invitations, proposals from business people. The impact of his presentation was growing, but she was still processing her encounter with Isabelle Laurent. That same afternoon, Maya met her at a fancy cafe. Isabelle wasted no time. "You have charisma, talent, and now a name circulating, but none of that matters if you don't know the next step." Maya frowned. "What's the next step?" Isabelle intertwined her fingers on the table. "Build your image, define what you stand for, and make sure the right people talk about you." Maya took a deep breath. "I knew this went beyond music. And what do you want from me?" Isabelle smiled. "I want to transform you into the next great artist in the country." Maya felt her heart speed up. This was the moment he had been waiting for all his life. But as she looked at Isabelle and then at Edgar Villar, who remained silent at the side, she realized something. She was surrounded by players, and now I needed to make sure it wasn't just a piece on the board. Maya looked at Isabelle Laurent, feeling the weight of her words. "I want to turn you into the next great artist in the country." That should be all I ever wanted to hear. But why was a part of her hesitant? She felt Edgar Villar observing the conversation without interfering. He wanted to see what she would do. "And what exactly does that mean?" Maya asked, keeping her posture firm. Isabelle smiled, as if she had already expected this question. "It means you will have a team working for you. Producers, advisors, image strategists. You will be shaped for success." Maya narrowed her eyes. "Molded." Isabelle's expression didn't change. "The public needs an icon, Maya, and we need to make sure you are exactly that." Edgar Villar finally spoke. "And how much of the real Maya is left in this process?" Isabelle let out a low laugh. "Oh, Edgar, you more than anyone know how this works. Everyone in this world needs to make choices. If she wants to be great, she needs to decide how far she is willing to go." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at Edgar, trying to understand what he was thinking, but he just waited for her answer. It was the first time that no one told her what to do. That decision was hers alone. That night, Maya returned home without giving Isabelle an answer. She needed to think. "What did you want?" "I wanted to be big. I wanted to win, but I didn't." "Want to be manufactured?" She picked up the phone and without hesitation called Edgar. "You were once part of this world," she said as soon as he answered. "What's the play here?" He was silent for a few seconds before responding. "Isabelle can take you to the top, but this has a price." "And what is that price?" "Control. They will try to decide everything for you, who you are, what you wear, how you speak. And believe me, if you get into this game, getting out of it won't be easy." Maya took a deep breath. "So, what do I do?" Edgar Villar smiled on the other end of the line. "You make your own rules." The next day, Maya met Isabelle Laurent again. The agent expected a direct answer, but Maya realized she wasn't there to accept or refuse. She was there to negotiate. "I accept working with you," Maya said, keeping her gaze steady. "But on one condition." Isabel raised an eyebrow. Interested? And what would it be? Maya leaned forward a little. I decide who I am. I choose my path. No one will tell me what to play, how to dress, or what to say. The room fell silent. Edgar Villa watched the scene with a discreet smile. Isabel studied Maya for a long moment. Then he let out a sigh and crossed his arms. You are stubborn. I am determined. The woman finally smiled. Then maybe you really have what it takes. Maya felt her heart speed up. She had won another battle, but now the real game was just beginning. Maya left the meeting with Isabelle Laurent feeling a mix of euphoria and tension. She had achieved something important, the right to decide her own path. But Edgar Villard didn't seem completely satisfied. You think you achieved something big today, don't you? He said as they walked down the hallway together. Maya looked at him. I did it, didn't I? Edgar let out a low laugh. You won the first round, but now they will watch your every step. She narrowed her eyes. And what does that mean? Edgar stopped and looked directly at her. It means that if you make a mistake, they will crush you without a second thought. The weight of those words fell on Maya like a blow. She knew Edgar was right. The music world wasn't just about talent, it was about survival. And now she was on the board. Maya's first big decision came faster than she expected. Isabelle Laurent called her for a new meeting and presented 3 proposals from record companies interested in her career. Those are your options, Isabelle explained. Each of them has a different plan to launch you into the market. Maya analyzed the contracts in front of her. She didn't understand all the technical details, but one thing was clear. They all wanted to shape her in some way. She felt a knot in her stomach. What if I don't want to sign with any of them? He asked. Isabelle sighed. Then you will need an alternative route. But know that without a structure like this, everything will be more difficult. Maya felt Edgar Villa's eyes on her. He wasn't interfering. He wanted to see how she would play this round. She closed her eyes for a moment and made a decision. She didn't want to be molded. She wanted to build her own story. When he opened his eyes, he looked at Isabelle firmly. I want another way. Isabelle was silent for a moment. Then a discreet smile appeared on his lips. Interesting. In the following days, Maya realized the impact of her choice. Without a major label, she would have to build her career from scratch, using only her talent and the impact she had already made. Isabelle put together an alternative strategy: independent releases, exclusive performances, and clever use of social media to build her fan base. Do you want to play outside the system? So you'll have to be smart, Isabelle warned. Maya spent hours studying, learning about branding, music marketing, and connecting with the public. But the real challenge came when Isabelle asked a crucial question. What will be your first big move? Maya hesitated. She couldn't just release a song like any budding artist. I needed to make noise. And it was then that an idea emerged. She took out her cell phone, looked at Edgar Villa and said, I want to do something that no one will forget. Edgar smiled. Now we're really playing. Maya knew that if she wanted to play the game without following the traditional rules, she needed to do something unexpected. She spent the night thinking, writing down ideas, listening to old recordings of hers. And then there was a snap. The next day he called Isabelle Laurent. I want to do my first performance at the restaurant where it all started. There was silence on the other end of the line. In the restaurant? Isabelle repeated as if she had heard wrong. Yes, Maya confirmed. I want to go back there and play for those who saw me before all this happened. Isabelle sighed. Do you realize we can get a theater, an event house, something much bigger? I know, Maya said, but I want my story to start my way. She waited for Isabelle's reaction. The agent was silent for a few seconds. Then he smiled. You really don't want to do anything like the others, do you? No, Maya replied. Isabelle laughed. All good. Let's turn this restaurant into the event of the year. Over the next few days, Isabelle's team worked to transform a simple restaurant into a world-class spectacle. We're going to film everything, and broadcast it online, Isabel explained. If we're going to do something small, let it be huge for those who watch. Maya couldn't believe it. Within days, the restaurant where she was, Humiliated, became a prestigious stage. Lights, cameras, tickets sold out. And when Edgar Villar saw everything ready, he just smiled. You learned quickly. Maya looked at him. What do you mean? Edgar crossed his arms. You understand that, at the end of the day, people connect with the story, not just the music. Maya felt a shiver. He was right. This wasn't just a performance. It was a moment, and she was about to do something no one would forget. On the night of the performance, the restaurant was packed. Cameras positioned, lights adjusted, anticipation in the air. Maya entered the improvised stage and took a deep breath. The piano was there, the same one that Edgar Villar challenged her to play that night. She looked at the audience. Some people who saw her at the beginning were there. Others were new faces, waiting to see what she had to offer. And in the background, Edgar. Villar and Isabelle Laurent watched in silence. Maya sat at the piano. She knew this was the moment that would define everything. And then she rang. The melody filled the restaurant, reaching not only those present but thousands of people watching online. And at that moment, Maya realized she was no longer just a waitress who knew how to play the piano. She was the artist people were waiting for. The last note of Maya's song echoed in the air, leaving an almost sacred silence in the restaurant. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause exploded. People stood up, whistling, shouting his name. Some were crying. Others simply looked at her in awe. She had done it. Backstage, Isabelle Laurent took out her cell phone and checked the live broadcast statistics. 500,000 views in real time. She looked at Edgar Villar. Impressed? Did you know this would happen? Edgar smiled sideways. I knew she had potential, but now she's a star. Maya stood up from the piano and took a deep breath, letting everything settle inside her. In the audience, some important figures who had previously ignored her now wanted to speak to her. Producers, entrepreneurs, investors. But Maya didn't go to them. She walked straight towards Edgar Villar and Isabelle Laurent. And now? She asked, feeling the adrenaline still vibrating through her veins. Isabelle smiled, satisfied. Now, darling, the world is watching. The next morning, Maya woke up to her cell phone exploding with notifications. His name was all over social media. Who is the mysterious pianist? The young woman who enchanted the world with her story. A performance that cuts the internet. She blinked, trying to process everything. His video was shared by famous musicians, journalists, celebrities. She was becoming a feature. But before doing anything else, she picked up the phone and called the only person she knew would understand her. Celia, the voice of the restaurant's old cook, came from the other side, conveying excitement. My girl, I always knew you would go far. Maya waits, holding back tears. She had changed his life, but deep down I knew this wasn't the finish line. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. Maya was on top. His presentation went viral. Invitations for interviews and million-dollar contracts filled his inbox. Isabelle Laurent created strategies to transform her fame into an empire. Edgar Villar watched everything from afar, as if he knew this was inevitable. But something bothered Maya. She felt like there was still something out of place. It was then that, in the middle of the night, he received an anonymous email. You think you've won, but you still don't know all the pieces of the game. Some hands lift you up, others just hold you until they decide the right moment to let go. Look at who's next to you. Who really wants you to win? His heart sped up. The first thing he did was go to Edgar Villar. What are you hiding from me? She asked, looking directly at him. Edgar was silent for a moment, then let out a sigh. I knew you would find out at some point. Maya felt a shiver. What? He grabbed a document from his desk and threw it in front of her. Maya read the heading and felt the floor disappear. Exclusivity agreement, Villar Holdings. His eyes went up to Edgar in disbelief. You Signed a contract on me? Edgar remained calm. It was necessary to ensure that no one exploited you. I protected you from sharks, Maya. She held the paper with trembling hands. And now you own my career. He didn't respond right away. I'm the only one who can stop them from destroying you. Maya felt her stomach drop. All this time, he thought he was in control. But now he understood the truth. She was still a pawn in his game. She slowly backed away. You never wanted me to play by my own rules. You wanted to make sure I played by yours. Edgar didn't deny it. The world is not fair, Maya. I did what was necessary to protect you. Maya felt a fury rising inside her. She wouldn't let anyone decide her future. He took the contract, tore it in half, and threw it on the table. So from now on, I make my own rules. She turned and left. Edgar Villar stood still, watching her leave. And for once, he didn't try to stop her. Maya won. But now she knew her biggest battle wasn't against the world. He was against those who pretended to be on his side. She looked ahead to the future that would be hers and no one else's. And then for the first time, she played her own melody. And that's how everything changed. Maya, once seen as just a simple waitress, proved her worth in the most powerful way possible. She turned humiliation into triumph, leaving everyone speechless, including Edgar Villar himself. What would you have done in her place? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible story like this. See you in the next one.